If you can't take the heat, stay out of the Fragments of Silicon.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me as always are Golix and Petty Fan. Let us get to the personal ventures that we disguised up as news. Petty, you can start us off this week.
It's been up until today. It's been fairly hot, so the pool has been getting a lot of use. It has been like thunderstorming all day, so I mean, it's nice for a free pool fill, but now I need to add more chlorine to the damn thing, so it doesn't turn the brackish green again. And I guess also kind of good that it's been raining and stuff, because I think I pulled something in the pool yesterday because my shoulders hurt. So taking a day or two off probably isn't a bad idea. As far as like gaming stuff goes, I don't remember if I mentioned it on this show, but on July 20th, I will be going to the Digimon Store Regionals in Kansas. So if I get top 4, I will get an invite to the national championships in LA. I doubt I'm going to get top 4, but it'd be cool if I did.
It's the makings of a shonen anime.
I mean, really though, it is Digimon, so it tracks.
I'm not sure if they've ever promoted the card game though on any of the actual anime series.
Not in the anime yet, but they do have a comic and web novel based in that universe.
There's currently a trading card game, web comic, web novel going on.
Mm-hmm.
Previously, the card game never. Well, no, in Tamers it did exist in the universe, and they could use the cards to power up their Digimon, but they barely ever actually played it.
Yeah, and also a different card game, but yes.
Yeah, that was the old card game. The new card game is the
better in every way.
I've never played the old one by the real rules, because the rules were changed to suck even English, more in the US version. I mean, not that the Japanese version wasn't super complicated. But yeah, what I was gonna say is that Ghost Game is probably the only anime that fully existed during the current trading card game.
Well, and even then, that was more
started during 2020.
And that was more pushing the Vital Bracelet than.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying it was pushing. I'm just saying they couldn't have talked about the current card game in any anime except for like the last one or two, due to existence issues.
Yeah.
Well, there's always Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm kidding.
As far as like gaming related stuff, it's mostly been trying to round up all my 360 games and shoving them in the new 360 to make sure they update before the store closes. One nice thing is my Xbox One finally updated and fixed the issue where whenever I try and play a 360 game on my Xbox One, it would tell me I need to put in my password again to basically use my save file. So that's been fixed, and it is much easier to use my Xbox One now. So I can kind of, play games. Because I have a lot of 360 games. I've had it since I was like 16. I am now currently 32.
Half your life.
Literally, yes. So yeah, that's just been fun, and I need to see about. There's a few Burnout titles I at least want to grab before the store goes into the Aether. Because of music licensing, those probably are not going to the Xbox One. So it's also just what all games do you want? Pick them now before the store closes in 6 weeks, roughly.
Thereabouts.
But what sucks is the 360 does not have a cart feature in the marketplace, so I have to make individual purchases, which is probably going to trigger the fraud detection on my debit card, so I'm going to be getting a whole bunch of phone calls from the bank. So that's going to be fun.
I've had that happen.
Yeah, that's partly why things are now putting in cart systems, because duh.
Yeah. I remember when GOG triggered my debit card security.
Yeah.
Not the least of which was because they're registered in Cyprus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at
So
least it's
all of a
coming.
sudden
Yeah, foreign transactions. Yeah.
I get a phone call asking what all these transactions from halfway around the world are.
I mean, at least it's good that they're doing that and making sure you didn't just get hacked.
It's still a little creepy.
Yeah. But yeah, that's just been kind of my, I guess, week. I do need to sit down and play some more Digimon World 3 with Ogre. I keep getting sidetracked. ADHD sucks. Anyway, next victim.
Well, Golic said to you.
Well, I'm currently under the heat dome. It was 90 earlier today, though it's down to a bit above 70, so
For
hopefully
those of
not too
us
bad.
not US friends, we are using Fahrenheit.
Yeah. I have my air conditioner on currently, but that's mostly just because it got hotter inside than it was outside even. Hopefully I'll be able to turn it off before bed, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And we have also, I was able to relax today because I have today off from work because of Juneteenth, although it's also supposed to be hot tomorrow, so we'll see. We're also having some company this weekend, so my cousin and his son are coming up and his wife, so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully we'll have a good time. Video game wise, aside from trying to keep up in Splatoon 3, I finally got around to finishing Link to the Past on Nintendo Online. It's still good, and I'm way better at it than I used to be.
I mean, the passage of time will do that.
Yeah, but I'm still bad at some other old games.
I mean, fair.
It depends on how twitchy they are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm going to guarantee that none of us here are as good at, say, a shmup as we were a few decades ago.
I'm still not particularly good at the older Mega Man games.
I mean, I've demonstrated on air I can still rock a shmup from time to time.
Uh-huh. Also, if I'm worse at shmups than I used to be, then that's terrifying because I was always dog ass.
How the fuck do you get less than
term.
0?
Anyway,
one of the extra special punishing games.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's about all I got.
All right, I guess it's my go. Let's see. My week has been busy, let's say. Like,
good kind of busy or bad kind of busy?
It's turmoil.
Ooh.
That I can't really get into. Like, Like, believe me, I will be not too sad to see this year go by.
Oof.
Like, yeah, like it's just dealing with family. Let's say, more of that. Like I said, it's stuff that I can't really get into on air, but certain people want me to do certain things, and they have proven to be unreliable in the past. So I am very, very hesitant to engage in the situation. But it's like, on the other hand, if I don't, then bad things can also happen.
Fun.
So it's kind of a rock and a hard place situation. Like, but there's some time to contemplate. So, maybe more on that later. Not sure. Like, anyway, in terms of the heat index, well, of course it's hot, but since we're in summertime here, it's also the rainy season. So it's also the humid season. So it's also like walking out to hot soup every day. Like, look, there is no humidity like Florida humidity.
Especially in your part of Florida.
Right. Yeah, the coasts. Let's see. In terms of gaming news for the week, had to stop playing the Saboteur because the game would just randomly crash at points for no discernible reason, and I really didn't feel like hunting down what was going on there, especially since I was getting tired of what I like to call the 7th gen movement. Like, I'm not sure how much of a trend it is in today's games, but you remember back in the 7th gen when everything felt very sluggish.
Your body was made of cinder blocks. Joy.
Yeah, and the Saboteur had it in spades.
Ugh.
Like, right down to that, that trying to simulate human moving back and forth that always felt like you were controlling a heavy goods truck. Like, if you know what I'm talking about, you know it. Like, so I've moved on to the Mummy Demastered from our friends at Way Forward. Like, it's not as good as I've been led to believe it is. Granted, I'm only about an hour in, but it's like, I wouldn't say this is going to trump any Shantae game anytime soon. I mean, for a licensed game, it's stellar, sure. As a Way Forward game, it's definitely less than their original titles that I played. Like, it's like a solid 7 out of 10. Just there's a lot of cheap enemy placement. I think they know that because there's a lot of health pickups as well. It's always like a sign that you know what you did, so you're trying to compensate for it. But anyway, so I think that's our news for the week. So merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast, and joining us this week is Jayson Napoitano of Scarlet Moon. I hope I got that right.
It's close enough. Great to be with you.
Yeah. Right. So how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. I'm fortunate to be in San Diego, and the one thing that we're known for here is the weather. And so we've been enjoying temperatures in the 70s today. So sorry to rub it in, but otherwise, really enjoy to hear that you're playing The Mummy Demastered, because I've never actually played the game, but the soundtrack itself is really good, and in fact is on my Halloween playlist. So every October, I have a playlist of various things, and that album is on it. So I listen to that pretty regularly, at least once a year, and it's great music. So
it's an interesting soundtrack, and this is a good lead into, because Scarlet Moon is a interesting organization, like first of its type for our show. I mean, we've had individual composers on the broadcast beforehand, but you are like a video game music service. Can you tell our listeners what that means exactly?
Yeah, so Scarlet, thank you. And Scarlet Moon is just turned 10 at the end of last year. So you'd think, being in business as long as we have, I'd have a very concise elevator pitch as to what it is that we do. But it's pretty sprawling. And so sometimes it's hard to kind of explain. But Scarlet Moon's basically a music label, and it's an umbrella for a bunch of different service lines. And I think the one you're referring to is our Scarlet Moon Artist service line, where we represent a bunch of composers and sound designers, and we try to match them up with developers or creatives who are making projects that need music and sound. And so our kind of big thing that we focus on is we represent a number of veteran composers from Japan specifically, and so really trying to pair them up and kind of spread the word that they are available to work on smaller indie projects outside of Japan and that kind of thing. And then where you probably hear from me the most on your end is probably through our, we also are a PR agency. So we do, press outreach for our releases, as well as, we're a contract service for PR. So we do game promotion and game music promotion for other labels and game studios and that kind of thing. And then we have the record label. So that is the soundtrack that we work on. We tend to release to our label. And then we have our pet project on the label, which is the Prescription for Sleep series, which is kind of jazz to relax, chill, sleep, whatever you want to, that people stream while they sleep. So that's the way to do it, right? Have people stream for 8 hours while they sleep. And I guess that's one way to rack up the listens. But yeah, and then we also kind of have some side ventures where we do PR for just video games through a sister brand we have called Violet Moon Promotions, and we're actually trying to get into potentially get into the games development or publishing space, kind of exploring that as well. So I love games and love music, and it's just kind of one thing led to another. And when I actually came from a background in games journalism, and so I used to write about games and game music, and would be in touch with these composers, and they would always reach out and say, hey, I'm looking to get work outside of Japan. Do you know any agents who do this kind of thing? And I was like, yeah, there's one guy I know who does that. Here's his email. Then they would come back and say, oh, well, hey, I like that article you wrote on that website you write for. Can you help us get coverage? Do you know who I could talk to get on other sites? Be like, yeah, there's one publicist I know that works with game composers, and here's his email, and so on. They would own the rights to the music, want to release it outside of Japan. I'd put them in touch with the record label that does game music, and then they would all come back and 6 months later and say, yeah, no, they didn't really respond, or it didn't work out. Like, is there anyone else I could try? And that happened enough times to where I was like, okay, I guess I have to do it. So that's kind of how this big sprawling business kind of unfurled. But it's been fun, and I get to enjoy the kind of angle as being a huge fan of games and music, and enabling these composers that I love to write more music. And I tend to be the first person to hear it, even before the client. So there's that perk as well. So it's a little bit about Scarlet Moon and what we do.
Like, as you said, like, that's a very large breadth of, a few industries. One scarcely knows where to start. But I suppose, we should focus in on, well, you. And from the sound of things, it's like you've been with Scarlet Moon since the beginning.
Yep, I started it. And like I said, I was doing some writing. I kind of put air quotes around journalism, or game journalist or whatever. It was, really enthusiast media when all the blogs and things were taking off in kind of the late 2000s and early 2010s. I was writing for a blog. It was Destructoid, which is still around today. And and I'd written for a couple of smaller sites leading into that, sites that primarily existed to get review copies of games and get into E3. And I had a friend in high school who was like, "I'm going to E3 next month," and I said, "How are you doing that?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm writing these reviews for this website that nobody's ever heard of." And I said, "How can I do that?" So that kind of started it all, and I was writing for that site for about a year, just doing some reviews of mostly JRPG games that I was a big fan of. And this was the era of, I think PlayStation 2 games. I was reviewing a bunch of PlayStation 2 JRPGs. And, I went up to the editor and I said, "Hey, I would love to do some interviews with composers or some feature articles or whatever." And he said, "You know what? We're just here to get free copies of stuff and get into E3. So I don't want to edit any of that stuff." So I ended up, moving on to other sites and started a nerdy music blog called Original Sound Version that started in 2008 with a friend and colleague named Dale North, and he was working at Destructoid at the time, and eventually rose to be editor in chief there, and said, "Why don't you come on and be the music editor for Destructoid?" And that was really great because it's interesting when you write for a kind of a small enthusiast nerdy music blog and you reach out to PR people or companies and ask them, "Hey, can we have an interview with the composer? Or can you send us a copy of the game?" You get the response, "What are your traffic numbers?" Versus when you say, "Hey, I'm the music editor for Destructoid. Can I get X, Y, or Z?" They say, "Yes, yes. We'll send you 5 copies. Tell us what we need to do." So the access was pretty amazing. And so it's been me and this talented band of music talent that we have. I think there's 13 folks now. And it's Dale actually left games journalism or enthusiast media and decided to pursue his real passion, which was music. And so now he's one of the most in-demand and busy composers on our team. And he's down here in San Diego as well, so that's nice to have, local friend here. But many of the composers are in Japan. Hitoshi Sakimoto, who's known for Final Fantasy Tactics and Valkyria Chronicles and Ogre Battle and countless other things, kind of at the top of the roster there in terms of experience and credits. And we have Norihiko Hibino, who did some Metal Gear Solid and Zone of the Enders work, and Emmy Evans, who's the vocalist, who's known for her work on Nier. And then we have a composer from South Korea named Gumin Nam, who's done a lot of DJ Max and a bunch of titles out of South Korea. And then we have Dale, who I mentioned, in San Diego, and we have a chiptune artist up in Seattle named Coda. And so it's kind of a fun group. We have our own Discord channel where people hang out, and composers come. A lot of composers come and talk shop, and game developers come because they need help with audio, and it's kind of developed into this kind of thriving community. And in fact, if you look at some of our recent releases on the record label side, you'll see we have kind of our long running Christmas series where we have the composers on our team either create a Christmas song or a remix a Christmas song in their style or remix a game song in Christmas style. And we just did, what was it? Must have been the 8th volume last year. And then we started up a Halloween series as well. So it's kind of the same concept for Halloween. So it all keeps me pretty busy. But music is tough business. So maybe that's why I have all these different service lines, because nothing on its own was sustainable. So it's like, what else can I do to make a living? So I don't know. Maybe that's just the state of the industry. People having a hard time making a living making games. People having a hard time making living being a composer. So,
Right.
yeah.
Admittedly, the composer scene is probably the one that we're least plugged into. We're more developers and the like. We, like I said, we do have the occasional composer, but just by volume, they're like the least amount of people we've talked to.
Yeah.
So it is
because
interesting to get these insights.
All you got to do is start making a game, and then you'll meet every composer on the market, because there's a lot of hungry composers out there. And when we talk to game developers, the discipline that they hear the most from is usually composers and voice actors, and so they're out there. There's a lot of them.
Indeed. And has the ways that you've been connecting people changed over the course of the past 10 years?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, because when you are in the media, and again in quotes, the games press, you're primarily interested in networking with like PR, publicists and people in the PR departments at the publishers and developers and so on. And so you kind of have your established network. And I was plugged in well with composers as well, because I was writing a lot about game music. But when I transitioned to representing artists and trying to pair them up and find them work, you have to build a whole new network. And in fact, I think when I started the company, had I played, this was in 2013, 2014, had I played an indie game, which sounds ridiculous, right? Especially today, I probably couldn't point to more than one or two quote indie games that I had played at that point. And now today, I think that's primarily probably what I play are indie games. And so in terms of the work, though, it's pretty similar. Unfortunately, I guess I keep kind of poking around this idea that, like, oh well, there's all these AI tools now, and can those help me in some way do that kind of basic outreach? Because a lot of what I need to do is just tell people that we exist, right? Because they might not know that we're a solution, or what we do, or why you might want to work with us over anyone else. So, is that something that's tailored to quote being some kind of bot that's reaching out to people and saying stuff? Like, yeah, probably. But I think the reason why we're successful is because it's me, it's a person. I'm talking to people. I've been talking to some people for 10 years through various social networks, and I've never worked with them, and I probably never will work with them. But it's still nice to make a connection and find out how they're doing and what are they working on, and talking about games and talking about music and all this stuff that I love. So, I think that it has been largely the same. I'm kind of worried, because one of our biggest social media platforms to really keep a pulse on indie game development has been Twitter. And as we're all aware, things on Twitter have changed a lot in the last year, to the point where, was there going to be a mass exodus? Will there be a mass exodus? People are exploring all these other different kinds of platforms. And, I would lose a lot, because these are connections I built on that platform. And do they, what is the rate at which you can transition that over to another platform? You'd kind of be starting over. So, there are changes that are happening, but it's interestingly, I've never been asked that or even considered it before. Maybe it even makes me think, like, gosh, is it reasonable that I'm still doing things the same way I was 10 years ago?
I mean, if they're still working, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll admit that it's been tough the past year, right? It's across the industry, and as we see these layoffs, it's indicative of kind of the money, right? The money that's driving things. And this is happening not only in the video game industry. I think it's happening in a lot of different industries. But these studios are closing, people are losing their jobs, but also behind the scenes, there's not the funding to go around. Publishers aren't picking up, aren't willing to take as much risk as they might have in the past. Just like the movie industry, a sequel after sequel. Quit trying to make new things. Let's just pump out sequel after sequel. Games has been doing that, and I think that from that trickles down all the way to, game developers are looking to get funding, and are they looking for a publisher? Are they going to do crowdfunding? That publisher route is becoming harder and harder because you need to be further and further along to minimize the risk on their side for them to get picked up. So, so I will say that there's, if somebody wants to hire Hiroki Kikuta on our team, who's the composer from Secret of Mana, he's really popular with RPG games. Well, they might have said, you know what, it's a marketing spend. We want to have Kikuta-san involved. We're huge fans of Secret of Mana. Our fans will really dig that. We can promote it through, our marketing materials. Well, that money that they might have had before to kind of treat it as a marketing spend or kind of a dream come true spend is just, it's not there because the cash flow is reduced. So it's been less busy on the kind of that upper end what would I call it, maybe like a premium add-ons angle of a spend where we're just going to have somebody come in and do a guest track because we really think that would be cool. But projects still need music, so the composers on our team that work on the kind of lower end and take all things at indie budgets, they tend to stay pretty busy because people need music. But some of these bigger spends have been diminished the past year, and I think that's just the state of things in the industry.
No doubt. Like, it's a frequent topic of conversation on this program. Not just the layoffs and what's going on in the higher echelons, the AAA space, but the indie circuit. Granted, that is dealing with a different subset of problems, not just like a lack of funding, but I'd say the biggest problem facing indie titles these days has been the same for the past several years, and that's discoverability. There's just there are so many indie titles these days. How do you get noticed? And it's always a vexing question because some of the people that we've had on this program don't make it, so to speak.
Yeah, and if we knew what the magic sauce or formula was, then everything would be a smashing success, right? So not only is it not finite, but it changes, and there's just so many factors that can play into why something is successful at any given time that might not be able to be replicated a year from now. That it's tough, and it's that whole question of spending money to make money, and how do you get out there and make noise, and and doing PR work for game music, for our part, we get a lot of composers who come to us and say, hey, I did the soundtrack to this indie game and I thought maybe you can help us promote it. And I have to ask the question because I don't want to mislead them or take their money and produce a result that they're not happy with. It's like, what is your goal with seeking this promotion? Is it that you think we're going to put out a press release and you're going to sell so many more copies of your indie game soundtrack for a game that didn't perform well that you're going to recoup the cost of hiring me to do this? Or is your goal to invest in your brand long term, create some visibility on the internet, some searchability, get into the press release repositories, get your name out there in front of these journalists so that they as you do more and more things, it almost it's that whole idea of critical mass. And so yeah, I mean it's that same thing where are you spending it's like I think about this all the time because wouldn't it be cool to open a restaurant or a bar or something? Maybe it's always been a dream of mine. I don't know if anyone thinks about this, but food business.
I've seen enough programming. It's very, very, very difficult to go into the restauranteering business. Like, people, we talk about how difficult it is to get into games or music. It's like restaurants are like the hardest, from what I understand.
But it's that thing where you just have to have this huge, you have to have this pool of money that you are going. It's like you have to commit to X amount of time because it takes that long to kind of get to critical mass and to build up an audience and these kinds of things. And if you can't wait it out that long, then your chances of success are maybe less. So, I see, I work with people too who come and say we want some PR work for our Kickstarter campaign. And I go look at their social media channels and they have 100 followers on one and 200 followers on another. And it's like, well, are you really putting yourself in a position to be successful? And, I did PR for a project. No, I don't think I did PR for them, but we did music contributions to a project called Hazelnut Bastille. I don't know if you've seen that one or heard of that one. Kind of a beautiful.
Sounds familiar.
You're mentioning A Link to the Past, so very 16-bit era Zelda-like title, but based on some Greek mythology. The pixel work is even better than A Link to the Past.
It's like last week's guest.
Yeah.
But anyway,
but this developer spent 6 months building up an audience and was committed to having X number of thousands of followers and so on before they would launch their crowdfunding campaign. So it's really a big investment, and I think people get discouraged because we know it just takes time and consistency over time to build that audience. And if you get discouraged because it's not happening as quickly as you would have expected or liked, then a lot of people just give up and quit, before they get there. But people have life circumstances; they have to put food on the table. So I'm not criticizing anyone who has to give up and focus on those things. But I think perseverance is probably a pretty common trait of people who in the end end up being successful. I think they point to that as something that was helpful to them in a lot of cases.
I mean, perseverance seems to be an overwhelming trait in game development. Like, if only because we have just had so many people on this program tell us how long it's taken to make a game. We're talking 2 to 3 years, and not just doing the things surrounding a game. I'm talking about building the actual game takes literally years. Sometimes that's because they're part-time, they got another job to field or whatever. But, it's like each one of these projects is like literal years of their lives. And there has to be some sort of perseverance or passion fueling that in order to stick with it for that long.
Yeah, because how many, maybe, who knows what the percentages are. I'm sure maybe there's some data somewhere. But, let's say 1,000 people start making a game today. How many actually release? Is it 10%? It's probably some low percentage, right? But how many people stopped at 3 months? How many people stopped at 6 months and 1 year and 1.5 and 2 and so on? And, and there's so many parallels. You could say, like, I want to be a streamer. And you do your stream and you have 2 followers, and then you get 3 followers, and then you got single digits, and then you got double digits, and then you got triple digits, and it doesn't happen quickly. You just kind of have to keep plugging away and be persistent. And
we can attest to that.
Yes. Yeah. And I know this because I had a nerdy music blog that I started from scratch, and this company where we had built it from nothing. And and then I'll look back in 5 years from now and be like, oh yeah, wow, it was really kind of small fries back then at 10 years. And ideally that's the growth you see, is that you get to keep looking back and saying, wow, we've really come a long way. I never would imagine this. Like, how do we get bigger? That kind of thing. So
it's the eternal question for a lot of people. Like, and yeah, there isn't exactly an easy answer. Like sometimes it's just luck. Sometimes, you create Pal World and it hits, the right notes or the right time or whatever it was that caused that game to sell 10 million copies or whatever.
Yep. Could be the pandemic and everybody's inside and just wants something cozy. And, I feel like this whole wholesome game concept, they've always been around, but it's really been like its own little genre of things, really kind of took off as people were looking for comforts from the happenings of the world in video games. So,
yeah, we've had our fair share of not necessarily wholesome direct people, but people who make wholesome games. So
yeah,
sometimes they want cozy, sometimes they want. It all depends on what they're building.
yeah.
So
yeah.
it's
certainly
a wide range.
Call of Duty has no problem selling copies, so it's not all. Not everybody wants cozy games.
I mean, yeah, Call of Duty is a brand unto itself, but there's also Crazy Viking Studios, for example, who who builds very hardcore platformers for people who want that sort of thing.
Mm.
So one example.
I can't say I've never played a Call of Duty game.
I'm like, Call of Duty, I've played the really old ones, the World War II ones. But that might as well be a different series at this point, given how much Call of Duty is.
What's this one they just announced? It's like the 6th one in that series.
Like Call of Duty 2 and Black Ops 2. Black Ops 6, sorry.
Yeah, Black Ops 2 is the last one I heard of. And then all of a sudden it's Black Ops 6.
I'm like, wow, I'm surprised that they were gutsy enough to stick with a numbering scheme with one of these sub branches.
Yeah.
Because it's like Call of Duty 27. I honestly think it's like that high up. Because we get
there are a huge number of sub-series and multiple games with the same name, and sometimes even multiple games with the same number.
Now they're going to take over. There's going to be more Call of Duty games than Mario and more Call of Duty games than Zelda.
I mean, as someone who plays video games, sometimes it feels like it's already like that.
Well, I'm like, I think that this.
Although I don't think it's actually beating Mario yet.
Yeah, I'm like, Mario, I think, still has everything beat in that regard. Just because, a year will go by and he gets 5 spin-offs.
Yeah.
Like,
Call of Duty will catch up.
And if not him, then... if not him, then, his extended character reign. We're getting a Luigi title. We got a Princess Peach title this year. But anyway, so I suppose I should ask, what are some of the more recent titles that your group has powered, so to speak, in terms of connecting composers to artists?
Yeah. So our I got distracted there for a moment. I was looking at the Twitch site and it says TwitchCon is in San Diego. So it's like, oh, okay, maybe I'll go check that out. Take a little trolley ride over to the convention center. So some stuff we've worked on recently. I think the biggest one most recently was with Way Forward. We worked with that team to do the soundtrack for Contra Operation Galuga. And that was primarily Yuko Komiyama, who's a composer who's known primarily for Monster Hunter, who we signed, must have been in 2022. And so that was exciting to be able to work on that. And then Norihiko Hibino, who I mentioned earlier, worked on Metal Gear Solid and things, and with Konami in the past, in-house, did all the boss music for Operation Galuga. So that was a fun project to work on. I don't know if you've been able to play that, but that was a lot of fun and a lot of work in a short period of time. And then we had Dale North release the soundtrack to Wargroove 2, which came out in October of last year, which was an exciting one. And the chiptune artist I mentioned, Coda, just had released the soundtrack in May to Read Only Memories Neurodiver, which was a really cool FM synthesis soundtrack that we did on that. And
I remember that game.
Yeah. Snacko came out in early access. That's a cozy game that we did the soundtrack for. Astral Ascent was a roguelike vertical game, and then we just did this little farm, this kind of space colony building title called Little Known Galaxy. The soundtrack came out on that, but a lot of the stuff that most recently came out from the label was we had our that Prescription for Sleep album series I mentioned earlier. We did a ActRaiser volume. So we worked with Yuzo Koshiro on, and Koshiro-san and Hibino-san. Hibino is the Metal Gear Solid composer. He's a jazz saxophonist, and he has a duo that he performs in called Gentle Love. And so this is actually a fascinating story. So Norihiko Hibino was at Konami. He did Zone of the Enders, Metal Gear Solid 3, and he did 2, 3, and some stuff on 4, a bunch of other things. Had a jazz club in Tokyo, was doing all this stuff. And then he had what I'm going to call a midlife crisis, and decided that he didn't want to work on all these violent, he wasn't contributing to society the way he wanted. And so he was going to focus on doing therapeutic music and finding ways to help people through music. So he worked with a friend of his in Japan, and they developed this app called Prescription for Sleep. And the application was like, this is like the early iPhone days. There were some like soothing visuals and some therapeutic, small ensemble music that he had recorded, and that was the app. And it became a top downloaded app. I don't know if it was sold or if it was just downloads, but it became a top downloaded health app on the iTunes store. And so when I started this label, I was thinking about, oh gosh, it would be cool to do like an album series for sleep. That'd be really fun, like a remix album series. And I said, oh, maybe I could have Hibino-san, now that he wants to do therapeutic music, maybe there's a way for us to work together. And he said, yeah, I have this jazz duo called Gentle Love. We do improvised jazz. It's very easy for us to do. If you want to give us some songs, we can just do like improvised jazz versions of them to relax to. So we kicked off Prescription for Sleep, the album series. It's actually Prescription for Sleep Game Music Lullabies in 2014. So this year was our 10th year. And so on the 10-year anniversary last month, we released our 13th album in the series, which was Prescription for Sleep Heavenly Avatar, which Square Enix asked us not to call it Prescription for Sleep ActRaiser, unfortunately. So it's called Heavenly Avatar. And so, yeah, Hibino-san, Yuzo Koshiro is a big fan of Hibino's therapeutic music stuff. And I actually ran into Koshiro-san at Hibino does these various concerts in Japan. The latest tour is called Music in Heaven, where it's like spoken word and children's choirs and jazz stuff, and all this kind of interesting things. And I was at one of these shows when I happened to be in Japan, and Koshiro-san was there. So I was like, oh, hey. So they've worked together on various things over the years, and I said, wouldn't it be fun to bring them together to do this ActRaiser album? So we have some commentary from Koshiro, and we did this ActRaiser kind of jazz album, which I really enjoyed. And then our Discord community did an album called Canvas City, which is a tribute to the sound canvas, which was a synthesizer used in a lot of 1990s video games. The PC games that were being released at the time. It's that kind of in fact, we had a guest on the album, George the Fat Man Sanger, who is a the Fat Man.
We've interviewed him a couple of times a few years ago.
He's here in San Diego too, and he's a good guy. And so, given that he made a name for himself writing soundtracks that used the sound canvas. I asked him if he'd want to contribute a track, so he actually has a track on the album as well. But it's some of our composers, it's a lot of our Discord community. The Fat Man's on there, and we did this original MIDI album called Canvas City that's on our storefronts and things. And then Prescription for Sleep, The Gentle Love duo. We have a kind of a side series. He does this show at a inn in Japan that has this like these beautiful grounds, and all the rooms they have these balconies that face inward, and he sets up his little ensemble there, and they do like a jazz show, and it sells out when they do these shows. And so they've recorded a couple albums. They're trying to do one for each season, and so we released the I think it was the autumn one. We've done a winter one and an autumn one, and so that's something we did recently. And then the last one I'll mention is the I'm a big RPG fan. I mentioned, and JRPGs especially, and my favorite game series, and really just my favorite game, is the original Suikoden. I don't know if any of you have played that one. They're going to be doing a remake.
Never played any of the Suikoden games.
Well, the Scarlet Moon is actually derived from the original Suikoden. It's the empire that you're a part of, and eventually kind of grow to overthrow, is the Scarlet Moon Empire. Which I don't know if it's ever referenced in the original Suikoden in English. They mention it in the second game. But anyway, I'm a big fan, and the director of the Suikoden series, the first 3 games, Yoshitaka Murayama, he had crowdfunded a more recent game that maybe you've heard of, which was Ayuden Chronicle. And then he passed away, unfortunately, 2 months before the game came out. So, given how important that game was to me, Suikoden and Ayuden Chronicle, we did a little tribute. We have a kind of a side spin-off series called Prescription for Peace, a tribute to the departed. And we did the first volume, 2015, because Satoru Iwata of Nintendo had passed away. So we did a charity tribute with an Earthbound arrangement. So we did a Suikoden 2 track on this Prescription for Peace album, Volume 2, that was a tribute to Murayama-san and a bunch of other folks that Hibino-san and I have lost over the years. So that's a rundown of a lot of the recent stuff. You can see it's a pretty eclectic bunch of stuff.
Yes.
There's jazz, there's MIDI, there's soundtracks that we've done, there's tributes, there's all kinds of stuff.
Indeed. And as much as I would like to keep this conversation going, we are running low on time here.
Sure.
So, but we can have you back in maybe late July.
Yeah, I'm always here. Yeah.
Okay. Would July 24th work for you?
Wow. Am I on the spot here? I have to know where's my phone. That's one question.
Find the Rolodex. Wait, no, hold on.
Sometimes this happens. Sometimes an interview goes so well, we book on the spot.
All right, 24th. I don't see why not. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay.
So let's pencil it in.
And if adjustments need to be made, we can. All right. That works for us. Cool. So in the meantime, Jayson, it was very wonderful having you on the program, talking about all of this music and various facets of the industry. And I look forward to doing that again in late July. But for now, Petty, play us to the next segment. All right, so welcome to the topic of discussion for the week. And obviously, given what has happened a few days ago, we are going to talk about the Nintendo Direct.
I'm surprised to hear this.
I'm like, well, we knew the Nintendo Direct was coming sometime in June. We didn't know when until like literally Monday, as is the Nintendo standard.
And thankfully, they did it on a day before the day of the week that we do our thing on, so we don't have to wait until a week afterwards to do it.
Yeah. I'm like, and I think this Direct pretty much floored everybody. Because, it's not a secret that the Nintendo Switch is in its last year. It's in its twilight era. And I think people, I among them, was expecting a lot of filler, a lot of low effort stuff, a lot of stuff like Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. That's no.
Maybe they would have announced Xenoblade Chronicles X or something like that.
Yeah, I'm like, and mind you, we've been getting ports throughout the Switch's lifespan, but we were expecting more Nintendo World Championship editions and less Mario and Luigi brotherships. I'm like, which
there were at least 3 or 4 relatively significant things there.
Well, it's like in a weird spot, because this is the first new Mario and Luigi game in about a decade. I think they're citing Paper Jam as the last new one, which would make sense. Like, because that was a Mario and Luigi game that had Paper Mario in it, not an actual crossover. Like, because the game was made by Alpha Dream, it played like a Mario and Luigi game. Like, and of course, it's been about 5 years, 6 years since the last Mario and Luigi game. So it's been a while.
Paper Mario game, you mean?
Since
Mario and Luigi.
The last Mario and Luigi. The remake of Bowser's Inside Story.
Oh, right.
And there are many questions around brothership. Like, the big one is who's developing this. Because Nintendo has this policy of not announcing the developer or the staff until the game is out.
And Alpha Dream obviously doesn't exist anymore, though Nintendo did absorb some of their personnel, I think.
Yeah. I mean, going back to Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, it was only through some clever sleuthing that we found out who's the developer. And it turns out it's actually people we know. Like, because it's the people at Forever Entertainment.
Oh, they were my second guess.
I.e. the people who did Panzer Dragoon and House of the Dead. People we've had on this program. Like, it's weird, the people we've had on this program. Like, but anyway, so we don't know who's doing brothership. But, is it a new team? Is it, consisting of vets? Is it an external team, internal team? We don't know. We won't know unless somebody digs it up or until the game comes out. But it seems like the game's in good hands, at the very least. Like, it looks like a Mario and Luigi game. It plays like a Mario and Luigi game. They
did a very good job putting some of the squash and stretch that that series has always had into the new 3D graphics.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that looks like it's going to live up to the legacy. Like, because, let's face it, the Mario and Luigi series got a bit stale there. Not necessarily with what they were doing with Dream Team or Paper Jam, but, doing remakes of games that you could play on the same system that weren't even a decade old was perhaps ill-advised and probably contributed to the demise of Alpha Dream. We may never know. But be that as it may, Nintendo is like, I don't know, like weirdly trying to position it as the big holiday game, and I mean like literally positioning. Like it's got the November release date. Usually the game that comes out in November is like the big flagship title, but that's not happening here. Like, at least that's not the reaction, because I think everyone came away with the big Nintendo holiday title is going to be The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Like
that is another that's another big one that they announced, and I agreed with Arlo. I was pretty surprised when they pulled out, oh hey, it's a new Zelda game. Not at the end.
Yeah. I'm like, it's a surprise in a lot of aspects, because it's finally feeling the wish to get a playable Zelda. But it's also, as Amura said, they're not doing it in a predictable way. You're not getting Zelda the Sword Girl, because, they considered that and said, well, what's the difference between that and Link? And, fair play, there really is. Like, now going with the idea that of Zelda as a staff chick, not as innovative as they want us to believe. Or at least I know, because there's a little title on the CDI called Zelda's Adventure, in which had a playable Zelda wielding a staff. But
it's more like a wand, but yeah.
Well, I mean, she did use it to whack things, though.
Right, it was a wand that she would swing and cast spells.
Yeah, it was still more smacky than what they're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a lot more
barring the part where you throw rocks at people's heads.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there's no smacking going on in Echoes of Wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the rock. I'm like, believe me, the fan art has picked up on this. There's been a lot of fan art in just a couple of days. It's kind of incredible. But I think that shows the desire behind this game. You
okay, Adam?
And it's
I think Adam maybe had
probably going fairly well. Hello?
You were cutting out really bad there.
Okay, that was weird. Anyway, sorry about that. Anyway, so yeah, Echoes of Wisdom looks to be the big holiday title from Nintendo. It's not the only big holiday title they got, but seems like everything else is being powered by Square Enix. I mean, because in spite of their commitments to being as platform agnostic as possible, they're still pretty heavily invested in the Switch. Because, we got Dragon Quest III, the HD 2D remake coming in November. We got Romancing Saga 2, the 3D remake, coming in October?
Mm-hmm.
We got Dragon Quest 1 and 2 getting remade as well. And they're publishing, what was that mobile game from Nobu Uematsu? Eternia or something like that?
Something like that.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Fantasia? No.
Yeah. Damn it! I hate it when I forget the title of something.
I thought I wrote down everything that I showed off.
It doesn't matter too much. But yeah. And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the showstopper, the show topper, the show ender in Metroid Prime 4 Beyond.
Mm-hmm.
arguably the
You
biggest
thought it was
game.
disappeared, but actually it was hiding.
Well, I mean, like, people say the game has been in development for X amount of years, but that's only partially true because I think it gets forgotten that, development had to be stopped and reset from scratch at Retro Studios.
Mm-hmm.
And that was only 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And, we had a thing called the pandemic, which kind of stymied all video game development.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a surprise that it's taken this long. Now, and the results have been so impressive that, people have been suspecting that this is a Switch 2 title. I'm like,
or at least heavily Switch 2 compatible.
I'm like, it's probably the latter. Like, I'm of the opinion that, it's going to be a cross-gen title. It's not a Switch 2 title, like, because Nintendo said they were not focusing on anything for the Nintendo Switch successor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so why would they show this here?
It's probably going to be ported to the Switch 2 if it's not just, a new 3DS scenario where it's basically, the 3DS but a little more powerful. The Switch 2 be the Switch but a little more powerful but can run all its games.
Yeah. It's like, like the technical wizards are already pouring through the footage, and they've pointed out things like the lighting is still within the specifications of the Switch, and it matches up to like Metroid Prime Remastered, which Retro also worked on primarily. The point is that the art direction and just the talent of Retro Studios is on display here. I think it gets forgotten because, Retro doesn't release a game all that often. In fact, it's actually been 10 years since their last original title.
Yeah. Wasn't that one of the Donkey Kong games?
Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. They did do the port of Tropical Freeze to the Nintendo Switch, and they did do the remaster of Metroid Prime on the Switch. But as far as whatever original stuff that they've been working on, we don't know. It got tossed aside. The only thing that we know for certain is that they've been working on Metroid Prime 4 for the past few years. And Metroid Prime 4 has made an impact with the, let's say, deep lorists.
Sylux is there, and Sylux is the most mysterious thing left in Metroid.
Well, yeah. It's been speculated that he's been positioned as the main, he was going to be the main antagonist for a while now. Because he's apparently been teased at like the end of Corruption. I think there was a Federation Force he apparently showed up for. And in case you don't know, he's one of the hunters. It's like the game he actually was a part of is probably one of the most obscure Metroid titles. Metroid Prime Hunters.
Yep, and then has appeared in like super post game teasers for in a couple of other games.
Yeah, so he's showing up with a bunch of apparently those are mock droids. And that's apparently setting up a big confrontation. At least what we're getting from trailer 1 here. Like, it could be a fake out. It could be Dark Samus again, who somehow returned. Like,
there could be more than one thing. Yeah.
So there's been a lot to chew on. Like, if nothing else. And once again, this is just most of what Nintendo's first party stuff is. Also, I guess I should mention that Nintendo Switch Sports is still alive somehow.
Mm-hmm. Just Dance too. Oh no, wait. Nintendo Switch Sports is as a single game is still alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was released a couple of years ago, and they're like, "Oh, hey, here's a free update for basketball. We will not be taking suggestions."
Uh-huh. And probably I don't know, like, I don't want to say the lowest announcement, but the most steady announcement was a new Super Mario Party game,
Yep.
Super Mario Party Jamboree. I'm like, though it's at the very least the most stuffed Mario Party. Like, I guess ND Cube has finally taken those complaints about them skimping on the content to heart, because it's boasting 5 new game boards, 2 boards returning from Mario Party 1 and 2, over 110 mini games, and a Koopathon mode that supports over 20 players. So it looks like you're going to get your content for Mario Party.
Yes, and I know they weren't going to because they have realized that mistake, but everybody gets to go around the board on their own. Although this thing, they were saying there are a lot of side modes.
Yep. I'm like I said, this is just what Nintendo is bringing to the table. Got to mention the Nintendo Switch Online stuff. A pretty solid pack of games.
I still don't particularly want to pay $20 more a month or whatever for them, but
well, I'd say the shaky stuff's the Nintendo 64 stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the Game Boy Advance side, we got Metroid Zero Mission, which is like one of the few Metroid games that hasn't been to the service till now. We got The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, Four Swords, and the Four Swords is the important part here. It's got
Link to the Past is the same game, except for Link has an annoying voice clip for almost every action.
Yeah, they took the Ocarina of Time sound clips and inserted into Link to the Past to much annoyance. But, Four Swords is the key here. And that is a different game than Four Swords Adventures. That's the GameCube one with the link cable. This is actually, like, the second game in the Four Swords trilogy. The first one is Minish Cap.
And then Four Swords also takes place quite early in the timeline.
Yeah.
And then Four Swords Adventures, for reasons, takes place way at the fucking end of the timeline.
Yeah. But, like, the big selling point here is Four Swords is going to have online play. So you'll be able to connect up, making it probably easier than it ever was on a GBA to do this. Like, Capcom. Capcom brought some heavy hitters here with the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection.
Which some people are very happy about because at least one of those games is an extreme classic of the fighting genre.
They're pretty much all classics, if I'm being honest. It's just Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is the most beloved. But, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes, Marvel vs. Capcom 1, X-Men Children of the Atom, all Stone Cold classics.
And also, we included the Predator arcade game for reasons.
No, the Punisher.
Punisher, that's the one.
Yeah. I'm like, that was a bit random, but sure, why not?
I mean, if it's wrapped in a license, why not, right?
Yeah. I'm like...
that one reeks of, it was there, it was cheap to free, why not throw it in?
Yeah. And also, Capcom is finally putting the capstone on previous Ace Attorney games by bringing us the Investigation duo, including Investigations 2, which never got localized beforehand.
Never got localized officially. There is a very popular fan translation, and there is much angst about whether they're going to be using any of the same names, since
they are not
pun names.
Like they are probably not. If the way naming works, they're not going to use fans translated name.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I'm like,
unless that
it's
is
just
their
some people
actual
are very
name,
attached to
in
those.
which case, kind of how they can do about that.
Yeah. Anyway, as if I'm remembering correctly, Capcom's games are coming to Switch, the PlayStation, and PC. They are missing the Xbox because apparently Capcom does not have compatibility with the MT framework that they use with the Xbox One.
Yup. I was about to say, this is probably an Xbox One issue, isn't it?
Seems to be. Xbox fans are pissed, but I'm like, this is kind of above pay grades and stuff.
Yep.
Anyway, like I said, there's just so much stuff here that we can't really cover.
Yeah.
Because, it was 40 minutes. And
yeah, there were quite a few of other interesting third-party things.
Yeah.
But
clearly Nintendo won this summer.
Yeah. I mean,
by virtue of having more than 2 games that I care about, yeah.
At the very least, we should close out by mentioning that PlayStation is coming to the Nintendo Switch with Lego Horizon.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and they're not coming to Xbox.
At least not yet, TM.
Microsoft is not going to be thrilled, I imagine.
Look, I don't know what the politics are behind that. I just know that Lego Horizon Adventures is coming to the Nintendo Switch. And it looks pretty good.
If you're into Lego games, asterisk.
Well, here's the thing. It's being done by a different developer than the usual Lego developer. It's not Traveler's Tales.
Yeah.
So it's going to be different.
Hopefully.
Just from the footage I saw,
Yeah.
it's a lot more dynamic in its combat. It's the thing that makes me grow bored of Lego titles after a few hours. Yeah, there's stuff full of content, but look, they are just the most brain dead things.
I mean, they are made for children, but I also get the need of, can we have a little more here, please?
Yeah. Anyway, like I said, so much happened here. Maybe we'll continue this conversation with the MSP show, since it's our show tonight.
We make the rules.
And it does fall under entertainment. And that's a good segue to transition to the Endies. Coming up on the week ahead. So we do have a new episode of MSP happening sooner rather than later, because Mac is not joining us this week. He's out of town. So that means we don't have to wait around for him. Also, our guest has actually been here in the chat, so to speak, waiting for that program to begin. So
what's up?
Yeah,
we'll be getting to you in a minute.
Anyway, we do have a Friday Fragments show happening this week.
Yep. I think Adam.
If I can get to the right, we'll be. Oh.
You trailed off for a second. I didn't know if you were trailing off in thought or trailing off due to connection issues.
No, I was looking up the name. Yeah. Anyway, we'll be having Jose Castanheira of Zark Attack. They are working on their first commercial title, Exophobia. It's a boomer shooter in the vein of Doom and really Wolfenstein 3D.
I was about to say, from the stuff you sent me, I'm thinking Wolfenstein was an inspiration.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm going to have some questions about monotony there. Because, look, Wolfenstein was a groundbreaking game. it gets repetitive pretty quickly because of all the samey looking textures and stuff.
There's a reason why people call the boomer shooters Doom-alikes now and not Wolfenstein-alikes.
Yeah, but we'll get into that on Friday. And coming up on the Sunday reviews, we're having reviews of Logic Town, Just Axe, Dark Envoy Director's Cut, and Dark Sun. So until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.